for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone and welcome. So in today's video I'm going to be really slow because it's a slow day. I didn't get much sleep in the last 2 nights because the energies were so intense and I couldn't really sleep much. So perhaps some of you have felt it, and so much has been shifting. And as you've seen, the trajectory of my videos has been gradually and yet steadily changing. And it's almost like there is this return of love. And I want to talk about this today as in relation to the return of the beloved energy. Remember back around the time of 2012, 2013 and 14, I was in these so-called golden years of mine, and I was really moving into this beautiful beloved essence. And if you remember, I channel all these beloved paintings, and later on I even started recording these beloved songs of the sacred beloved. And it just poured through my heart, and it was this infinite flow of the inner reservoir that just kept on charging and moving outwards into life, right? So during these so-called transgression years, as I call them now, it's been difficult for me to feel that because the agony and pain have been relentless on the human body. And in case you don't know, that's how the dark energies work. The intentions of the Antichrist are always to oppress the human body, so the human body could not experience this beautiful pleasure and bliss of love. And so for a very long time, I couldn't connect to that essence. I couldn't connect to that space. And in my sharing of the transgression confession of my video, I shared about some of these challenges that have been presented, let's say over the last 1.5 years or 2 years. And it wasn't until last September in 2020 for my birthday that I got this guidance of the return of the beloved. And it was this feeling of resurgence, and I had a personal experience, and it brought that connection back. And it started flowing and pouring again, but it was very quickly stopped because remember when I returned to my homeland, that was October, I was still in that energy. I was still basking in it. But then in November, I kind of fell. And it was long, 3 dark, arduous months of constant releasing of what was put into my body. So this inception went so deep that it actually brought upon this conviction into every cell, right, of this death program, and that there is no such thing as the beloved, not at least for me, that I can't experience this anymore because all that I'm doing now is struggling, because when you're trying to survive every day, you don't think about things such as love, and you're not in that frequency at all. So it wasn't until we moved here now temporarily that, especially now in March, this resurgence started. And, we have this year that Spirit calls the year of resurgence. For many of you on this illumined beloved path, what I'm actually talking about. So we've all had our ups and downs and challenges, and, we're different on the path that we had to endure and we had to undergo. But ultimately today I want to talk about this importance of this illumined beloved path, because in the recent years, I've touched upon this topic from a very, knowledge kind of emphasis. I had an understanding. I talked about avatars of Illumined Union. If you remember, I did that recording. It's still on my webpage, under the beloved section. And there's so much material there. But, I'm actually in a way thankful. I'm grateful that this happened, right? This transgression. I'm not saying it wasn't horror, pure horror, but what happened was, now I'm seeing there was a constant stream of pushing towards achieving, pushing towards doing. I was on this stroll, like ta 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 ta, and I was rolling like there is no end. And I didn't even know where I'm going anymore. It was just so intense, this pursuit of what I need to do, what I need to share, what I need to cultivate. And this often stifled this natural tantric beloved, flow of mine that I have so naturally developed over the years, especially since 2014 and 15 when I started doing the Tantrika, if you remember. That was just the beginning. I think it was a little later, around 2016, this started for me. But it just really went deep. And then, you know, these transgressions actually put this inception into me. So I'm glad that I had to go through this unveiling of what that inception was. And although it was difficult, once the process of removing that from the body began, that was the most arduous part of it. But it was so vitally necessary, you know, so that the beloved could once again breathe and come into life. And so for such a long time, you know, I felt like this relentless desire to not be here anymore, because it just, nothing felt right anymore. You know, there wasn't anymore the sense of this love. You know, imagine how it is when your body is in constant pain. You can't connect to that state of love anymore. And this is what the darkness has been doing. That's why we have methods developed as torture, you know, and terrible inflicting of pain. And what this does to the human body brings upon tremendous trauma, you know, and that trauma has to then be released, which was my winter this year, what I had to experience. And I'm still sure there's elements of that, but it's mostly been really, you know, gradually dissolving and being replaced again with the splendor of this illumined love. For me, this illumined love is this natural, organic flow of life that, you know, no one can take away from you. It's just there. It's the kind of love that just is. You don't need a reason. You don't need a specific or special person. Sometimes it comes, and a person would trigger you to go deeper into that self-exploration. And this is also what I want to talk about here today, because perhaps so many of you are pursuing this path of what I call illumined union, and it's the illumination of whatever kind of love or relationship you're in, so that naturally or eventually organically there's nothing else but that Christ pure love within the both of you. And many people are pursuing that, and they're realizing that, you know, this so-called twin flame, you know, that's so often called. Yeah, there's a nice birdie there, just here, just next to me. Oh. Anyway, came to say hi. So it's, you know, when you watch all those videos talking about this healing and mirroring and, you know, all these patterns that come out, that's of course a deep part of people's journey. And, you know, we all are on the journey. Today, you know, I want to talk about the pitfalls of not seeing that yet, and the blind spots that we can develop if we're prematurely moving into what we call spiritual integration. And, you know, so we neglect this human child, this inner child that still has this yearning, and we kind of never address it. So it remains as a wound that's never actually addressed. And then we're going to get to the last part of what this splendor of illumined love is and what it feels like. So there's still an agenda of many of dark nature, of course. You know, I like to say the Antichrist, preferably, because darkness is still a very irrelative term in those regards. It doesn't always describe what this is. So that is that which transgresses against life. And life, in basics and actuality, is this constantly streaming pulse of life, born out of the womb of Divine Mother. So naturally, this distortion has been in this realm to make life very masculine, rigidly, indoctrinatingly masculine, you know, and it's been constant, this pursuit, especially when it comes to spirituality, this knowledge, you know, even when you look at all this flooding of these readings, you know, about twin flames, they're always addressing the relationship as someone giving you guidance, and then you're tuning into that guidance, applying it to yourself. But it's still always something that you're pursuing, need to know about this relationship, what's happening in this connection, what's this really about, never really returning to the self, right? Return to the self is what I already has described to you as constantly coming to the core of that circle and bringing that love, that illumined love, back to yourself, no matter who you wish to share it with or how you wish to express it in the world. In the end, it always has to be fed back through you, because you are the first embodier. You are the first love. The self has to be that first love. Your inner child, the divine human counterpart, has to become that ultimate expression of that first love. You know, we as humans, we've all had our first love, perhaps, you know, some of us maybe never got it in terms of an external mirror, and the divine sends us these mirrors so that our soul could awaken further in the human body and get rid of these distortions and illusions, right, that keep us apart and living in separation. And also now in our world, there's so much struggle, right, because we're all just trying to survive. Also takes the focus away from what is really essential and truly important. And in the end, when you get that far and when you've pursued all that you believe you could about spirituality, and still there's a void, still there's a thirst in your soul, there's nothing else but the return to this union. And lately I've been getting a lot of these messages, the return home, the return of the soul and union, and that love is working and it's working through us. And I've talked about some of that. And on my Patreon page, we actually did, throughout the last 2 years, many of the Illumined Beloved readings. Some messages coming through really beautiful and profound. And it's this application of that firstborn child within you first. And then when you feel you are in that embodiment, like gradually starting to pour it out into the world, but from the illumined core, which is much different than that conditional, attached love, right? Love that is actually an attachment. And it's not always recognized in our world. A lot of times we think we're in that love and it's unconditional, and it's not. And this is where I want to talk about these pitfalls now, these traps. Because what we do, you know, our spirituality in this realm, in this time now, it became rather mental. Everything became this pursuit of knowledge. Even when you think, well, I'm just picking up information, it's not the pursuit of knowledge. And often it hides itself as that. And we mask a lot of our true self with this ideology of what we're pursuing as an idea of spirituality. Even self-work or working on ourselves has become rather, you know, abused, this term as well. And so it almost feels like that, even that in a way has been hijacked in our realm. And it's like this constant seeking of that. And that, in truth, makes us never become that. We're always seeking the self. We're always seeking something or the next experience. And most often, what we know, right, we've learned something spiritually, has become a belief, but we haven't yet embodied it. In our physical personal life, we haven't yet mastered how to cultivate that knowledge and making into living truth, living reality. So there's a division between our ideal self and our self as we're living it now. And we kind of stop the integration process because we get so busy. And remember, living on the surface of things and being very much in routine, especially those of you who have more routine-based lives, it's again withdrawing, it's pulling our attention back from that core, from that heart, from that love, which in truth is so simple. So everything in our realm is designed to keep us away from that simplicity, to keep us away from that core. And even when we get triggered now, we don't even have time anymore to get triggered. I don't have time for this, we say. I need to pursue what's really important. And you go in this linear fashion, right? I need to pursue ascension. I need to pursue this. And, you know, that's my work. And we get so instrumental, right, that we don't slow down. And I've talked about previously how important this slowing down is for you to really feel. Feeling comes with slowing down, not vice versa. So this pursuit of spiritual understanding, even understanding the self, has become so distorted now in this realm that it makes it even more difficult for the soul to truly remember its original nature and come through transparently through the body. And so there's very few people who are fully authentic and transparent. And when you are such an individual and you will reflect that transparency to others, they're going to quickly go like, too blinded. I don't want to look into that mirror yet. But the divine sends these mirrors for a reason. So recently myself on this path, because I was so much charging ahead in what I believed it's expected of me. You know, a lot of it is natural, but some aspects were not. Let's face it, right? We all have to go through these things. And everything we receive begins with purity of spirit, but then can get quickly distorted along the lines of living this human life, and how quickly these thoughts and other external influences can hijack that as well. And we think, well, that's the idea, and it's no longer the purity of what spirit really intended with us and through us. And it becomes something else. It becomes too much of something, right? Like in my life, everything was too much of that, right? Too much just sharing, doing. And it takes, to be in this beloved essence, it takes to be in the feminine creation principle. This is the principle of the womb, regardless of the fact whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. This is the womb of life, the pulse of life. And when you're in it, you feel it, you know it. There's without a doubt, there is this knowing. Spiritual knowing, right, or knowledge is not the same as being in this knowing, being with life as life itself. This is this self-born principle of life. When you're in this space, it's like life is channeling the greatest, most authentic juiciness of life, this essence through you. And because most people are still unable to have that cultivated at all times, they need these mirrors, they need these reflectors. Sometimes, remember, a reflector is too bright and you're going to do like, and you don't want to face these shadows. And recently I had this example of something really triggered me, and I was asking and praying to Spirit. I said, why sometimes people have these responses, you know, and I was praying. It's like, why is the ego still so... Why is the devil fighting to remain, you know, for the people to remain in this ego, to preserve that condition? And so Spirit kind of presented that to me as if we had like a playground, right? And there was these children. And one of them would be, or, you know, let's just say it's one, to give an example. One of them would be aware that maybe behind the knowledge or the integration, they're kind of behind others, or let's just say there's two, and one is behind the other. And because the ego is still there and separation is still there, that separation keeps telling that one that they're not good enough, right? But what happens is the later steps that Spirit showed me, if there is an identity with that not good enough, there comes often a result of still needing to stay in that self-induced bubble, because at least it gives you a sense of something, a sense of self. It's not yet though the true self, but it's almost like the ego gets too stubborn, because if you're aware that maybe you're not yet where others are and how much the union they embody, and you're rather ignorant, and you get so defensive, so deflective, and so with pride, right? Stubborn pride, that you would rather stay in this bubble than join others, because if you have to join them, you have to make those steps. And making that first step makes you rather, you know, deeply realize that, oh, this is where I am. If you're staying still, there's still a conviction that you can still have an ideology about yourself, but I'm fine, nothing's wrong with me, you know, I'm still good. And you're actually isolating yourself from the rest of the tribe. Let's say there's soul family, right? Other souls who are pulling you, they're calling you. There's this stubborn aspect that doesn't want that, because it rather stays dormant and still and not make a move, not make a change, but to make that first step. This often happens, and you won't believe how often, and how most often people don't even recognize it, because when you're in the bubble, all you see is yourself and everything's perfect, right? And I've shared in the previous update how in most cases, right, when you're truly awakening, it will get difficult. First, it will get really difficult. I'll tell you, if you want to wake up through all the levels of this inception and the hoaxes, the matrix, the antichrist, all these levels, you're going to have to go pretty deep. And that's hurtful a lot of times. You go through it, but the Christ keeps you. The Christ envelops you when you're going through that dark. It protects you. However, if you rather stay stuck and stay still, the soul won't grow. It'll remain stifled, and what I call this devil aspect, this antichrist aspect, will keep fighting for that soul that kind of subtract itself from the rest. And that soul might have an idea or an ideology or a feeling of the beloved. There's a desire that's always there. It's always innate. It's calling that soul back home. But the soul at that point is incapable of somehow really connecting and grounding that connection in the physical realm. Can remain a fantasy, right? And just recently I heard someone speak about that. It was really resonating, because the person was saying how for these kind of individuals, it's very easy for them to play that ideology or a belief about the beloved or someone they have in their mind, and they keep replaying that through distance, never physically, right? Let's say an online relationship. And it's easy for them to get in a role. It's like a role playing and getting in that sphere of reality. But when it comes to something physical and concrete, they kind of back off, because it's scary. because they don't trust themselves enough to step out of that bubble and to truly surrender, and what I call no longer living in this threshold, but jumping into life, jumping into reality fully. So a lot of people would not notice that, and most often also is masked under this either work or a relationship dynamic that's more karmic, that doesn't fulfill the soul, that doesn't invite the soul into the richness of this playground that is life. Also, spiritual pursuits, same thing. I need to continue now with mentioning something, because recently on my Patreon page, someone asked me, they were mentioning this Merkaba activation. And speaking of Merkaba, right, as the so-called light body principle, masculine, feminine halves being one whole, a totality of self. And often it's also described as the vehicle for ascension. And it's a knowledge that we kind of hold on to as we've read about it. There's an esoteric meaning behind it. It's metaphysical, but it's not lived, right? Again, same thing, same principle. A lot of the knowledge we're getting this way does not yet cover the basis of why we're here at this time now as humans. We'll get to that later too. So the person was talking about these teachings, Merkaba activation, that supposedly, according to some New Age teacher, well, in my case, that's New Age, you need to do that activation every day if you want to ascend or whatever. I don't know. Now let's take that statement and look at from what I always presented, the perspective of the cosmic or ascended masters. Remember that no master that was on earth ever spoke about you as a human pursuing your ascension path, needing to do a specific activation, and only that if you don't do it, you will not ascend. How many of them have been saying that? Oh, look, there's a bee and she's sleeping. Oh, I have to be careful, she won't sting me. And so, and so none of them, right? None of them. Just keep looking at the bee. Ah, look at her climbing on my shoes. So anyway, none of them. Remember the teachings of Jesus the Christ. They were so simple. A lot of them are also hidden because in actuality, a lot of these teachings as avatars of Illumined Union, together with Magdalene, they were bringing forth this truth about sacred partnership and sacred marriage and what it means for the cultivation of, this so-called Merkaba, the soul, right, the spirit, and then through the body. Merkaba, that's the threefold trinity that we are, that we work with in the pursuit of ascension. And I actually do these teachings on my Patreon page. And the true meaning of this, and what my spirit came to share through my embodiment in this lifetime, is soul liberation. Because what we have now in this New Age-based spirituality is the pursuit of something you need to activate. And a lot of these people don't realize they can't activate something if their physical human life still lacks so much of that liberation. It's almost like you try to get these grades done without the knowledge of basic principles of life. Most people don't live according to divine principles of life. They haven't even had a solid foundation. They're not even self-aware why in this lifetime they're even here. What's their soul yearning to fulfill in this lifetime? And yet they want to activate this and that. And there's so much distortion about these so-called activations because, remember again, the mind teaches complexity. The human mind developed this, not masters. Masters focus on simplicity of ascension and the truth of universal union. So Aurea, who is my spirit mother, she talks about liberation. So most people now need to fulfill this liberation of soul first. They need to get out of all that's still keeping the body closed up and closed off to the genuine essence of life. And that's what I teach. I teach body illumination, not activation of this and that. And these light body principles and how to access the light body are so simple in truth. And I'm just starting to unveil and unpack this knowledge through my Patreon work called Illumined Ascension. So in truth, going into this essence, the core of the heart of the mother, and that which is divine light intelligence, which comes through our light body, is this fusion that is organic. So how come God created us, right, in this perfection of the immaculate design? It's born out of spirit first. And then we, as humans, think we need to activate something and we need to do something according to this and that kind of principle every day, or otherwise we don't get it. We can't channel life force. We can't, channeling or cultivating life force is much more simpler than you think. But remember again, the darkness likes to distort things and make them complex. It keeps people into this ideology that spirituality is supposed to be interesting. I talked about this trap before. It's not the truth. Don't fall for it. Because many times the devil masks itself in saying, look, this path of the Christ is so boring. Because that's what the devil believes, you know. Doesn't find any pleasure in knowing the Christ. Because it does not know that love, because it cut itself away from that source of the pulse of that love. And those fallen aspects are trying to influence as many souls on this path and gathering them along. And it's still so masked. I sometimes call my integrated meditations that are received through spirit activations too, but they're not something you need to do, and if you don't do that, you don't get to that next stage. They're assistance into what spirit shows me and applying these divine principles through our body to illuminate the body. But they go hand in hand. You can't work only with the light. You have to work with your magnetic nature, which is the feminine pulse of life. So in my activations, the feminine, the womb principle is always present. Because without that, you're gonna be taken up, and you won't have anywhere to land. That's why most people can't operate in a way that they can create abundance through their soul, and they're dependent on the system because they don't have what it takes in terms of anchoring that, because they haven't been applying their path gradually, like having an understanding, working on unpacking that understanding, and then working on synthesizing through that integration, that understanding. A lot of times we kind of brush our hand and say, yeah, I know that already. Why are you saying that to me? And something keeps on returning. Maybe we don't know yet because the experiential wisdom is lacking. And so the reason why that is so much a part of this beloved union and love is because nothing runs without it. In truth, it's so simple. This love that the mother of life feeds through us, through the intelligence of the heart, activates in itself that organic intelligence of the cosmic Christ principle, which already is. The more you're opening up to life, the more you're opening up to that principle. It just grows and blossoms within you. It's like a flower blossoming. Nothing needs to activate it. Well, perhaps bird song, yeah, and sunlight, yeah. But it's just a part of her natural cycle. See, it's not like it needs to happen or, you know, it's just all in the spiral of life. It's not instrumental. It's not guided with this intellect. And most of, as you know, what we're doing is unlearning, not learning new principles. So, you know, it's difficult. I see it for people to truly be in that space because it's so simple that most often they can't surrender to something that's just so simple. It's like struck at the core of your being. And we're all struck so easily with love. You know, when you fall in love with something or someone, you just know in that instance, you're in it, you're surrendered. It perhaps doesn't stay because, of course, the dynamics of two people might be different and their paths might be different. But you, in that moment, you are really having a true experience and you're mirroring and reflecting something powerful to one another, right? That love. The power of human emotion to guide that love. The problem is only that humans don't have the capacity of the understanding to understand what this falling in love is meant to serve and what it's truly intended for. So we distort it into something else. And then we want to get that essence through teachings and getting higher or more advanced. And, you know, the goal is always there. If you don't have any more spiritual goals to achieve, you have actually surrendered to what we've done in the previous video when I talked about the mystical nature of ascension, right? So the more you surrender, you let love guide you. You let the principle of the womb of the mother to hold you, and that which is of the light to naturally blossom within you. When you have enough magnetic nature and stature, that light, which is electric, can come in. These are the two masculine and feminine principles of life that we're not using properly now. Most people don't. It's just how it is. I'm not being ill-intended. I'm just saying it as it is. Because otherwise, most souls would not be in such relationships that don't really reflect their full self. They have much yet to integrate and learn about themselves. And some of us are here just passing through, but still we have these wounds. You know, I know of myself. I know who I am. I know I live my life already the way most people still can't, like fully free and authentically, and just be, and it's enough. However, living this human life does not exclude me from anyone else. I develop my own wounds and tendencies. So when a relationship or something is presented to me, I will have to see what that cycle is, especially if it's something repetitive. And usually the mind tricks us because it would say, well, that's about the other person, but it's never so. They have their own, stuff to figure out, but we have to do our part. We have to see, is there still a wound there perhaps that we keep on reenacting and playing out? Like, for example, in my case, that wound I've been addressing recently was this ideology that, I'm only here to serve. I'm never going to experience that kind of love. But the human was still hungry for that exchange, which is this human love, not just divine, but human, because they're one. And the growing desire was still there. That part, though, because of what happened and because the way I live my life and because I'm here as a spirit guide, that part often feels in conflict, because it feels, well, I have to let that go. It's not for me. So, I have to go back up and do my work here from this level and not look down. And that's when it actually hurts the inner child. And so seeing that wound, like for someone might be, I've recently been having this mirror, and someone might be in this wound aspect and they might not recognize it, but it's there. And the wound they might be carrying within is this conviction that they can have more that they now have. They're constantly longing for more, like more expression of their sensual sexual nature, perhaps with the other. And it's even when it's with the other, it's you allowing yourself. The other just serves you as a gift of the soul companionship. So you can share this together, because certain things we cannot do alone, And we have these mirrors. That's the beauty of life being physical, creation being as it is. And that wound perhaps for that being would be, I can't have more than that. And that just keeps them stuck in what already is, replaying that and fantasizing about more, but never actually doing the steps that, get that in action. So for me, that belief, and everyone needs to find their own, if we truly are here to do the work of illumination, that wound was, that belief that never happens for me, happens for others. I don't get to acknowledge this human aspect of mine that also craves this expression. Doesn't mean we can't relate that instantly, automatically to that being, let's say, a partnership that we have a rigid belief about how partnerships are on this planet. But I'm talking about the experience of that, of blissful culmination and sharing with someone in that union, in that perfect connection that's pure, that completely authentic, intimate sharing between the two. And sometimes it just happens for a while, or, sometimes it's a relationship that blossoms and develops into more. But I'm talking about either way, we have to surrender the outcome, but we have to address the wound in the beginning and see what is there. And then bring that love back to that wound itself, because this is where we're starting now. A lot of people in terms of these unions have been doing a tremendous amount of work spiritually, but we've not been tending to the inner child. And more spiritual and psychic you are, and like I said, just recently someone talked about this, and the person was saying a lot of people who channel all the time, they receive so much of this wisdom, but they channel all the time. They have not yet perhaps automatically integrated it. They don't live it fully in their lives. So it takes a while. And sometimes we wish we already want to be there and we want to be ahead. And we don't want to repeat these cycles and, let's say, triggering relationships. But we can't cheat our way through life, right? We can't demand life to be something else. Like in my case, I can just share my story is I know who I am as a guide. That identity is not even identity, but it's a very firm knowing of the self. That part for me has always been easy. I've shared this with you before. Like human love that can get messy sometimes and painful and hurtful. That was always tricky for me because I didn't understand why people get so defensive and argumentative, and in a while, like I shared with you, I also played these patterns through when I was younger. And now being in my older days, just reflecting about these things, it feels strange, like this estranged feeling. And yet it's still important, because when aspects are returning and we're reflecting about them, it means there's an aspect of something we haven't paid much attention to and we haven't allowed it to grow. Like in synergy with that which we call our higher aspects, because the problem with this spiritual world is everyone's talking about the higher self, the higher aspects. How many people are talking about the illumined union within the human child. I've never seen anyone, just myself. And how Spirit, has been telling me for years now that the human is the key. That once you fulfill every desire from the heart, when you just simply allow, you don't have to put an intention, this has to happen. You simply say, I allow that the mother's love flows through me and nourishes me completely. And may it unfold and may it come in unexpected, ways, unconditionally to me. But I'm just open and I allow that I'm filled with this. I don't get to, with my pattern or belief, limit myself by saying, well, I'm not supposed to have that seeing as the world is and how I am, right? This again is wrong because we're putting a determination or labeling ourselves and therefore limiting this flow of love. And the more we're actually in Christ, the more we have this deep desire to just love without a reason. That's been happening for me. Just wash over and penetrate deeply with this love. But also, when the love is truly of Christ, it returns back to you. It doesn't go into someone and stay there automatically, because that can also create a condition, right? It can create a conditional attachment. But if it's really Christ, it comes back to you because it's a love that flows. Remember, it's an infinity loop. Love that's conditional goes and it stays there and you feel devoid. You feel emptied inside. It's how most human relationships unfortunately still are. And those of you who understand that you've never had a desire to build such a relationship, you wanted to become this vessel of life yourself first. And some of you were not afraid to be alone to pursue that first. It doesn't mean necessarily that on your path you remain alone all the time. But it's very important, if we are to pursue this, what we call illumined union, there's steps we can simply not skip. There's aspects of what we already know, and the more intelligent you are, sometimes it's the worst. Because sometimes the more you are intelligent, the more you know things, the harder it is for the human self. Have you ever noticed how simple people are always the happiest? Because they don't have that kind of mental capacity to know so much and understand so much, which often kind of pulls you in another path. It kind of sways you into something that maybe shouldn't always be the main focus. Should always be love first, right? And so sometimes it doesn't serve us. That's all I'm saying. And we have to be with where we are. We can't skip steps. So even people who recognize their beloveds, let's say, they want to be right in, totally, all the way already. But there's still steps to take, right? And this, the hard part. And the steps, I'm not just talking about the physical manifestation part. I'm talking about learning to have complete source-infused relationship, complete trust in ourselves, because we trust Spirit, we trust life, right? We trust ourselves. And then this surrender of the outcome and surrendering into life. Letting life guide us by concurrent, in the moment inspiration. It's like when your heart jumps and you don't stop yourself from doing that. It's just like, you let it flow. You don't go like, yeah, I'm not supposed to do that or express in this way. Pursuing by this current divine inspiration that flows. That feels it's charging you up. And if it leaves you depleted, in the end, it means you haven't returned the love back. And in the beginning, before this is automatic within us, it's just integrated organically, we can do this exercise. Like I said, just go into your inner heart chamber and ask that love to come back to you. Because when we're conditional to ourselves and to others, we often want to give to them, but we don't want to receive that which we've given back into ourselves and let it feed us. Let it sustain us with life. That's why relationship gets so... And people go like, you don't give me the way I give you, and all this, and because of that, because we haven't really learned what we are, which is Christ beings. And we don't know how to live like that. We live all the other ways, but not that. And if we know how to do that, we'd all just be so happy with each other. We could form these beautiful partnerships on earth, and life would be blessing all the time. And we'd have this ecstatic union experience very often. But as you can see, we're not there yet because there's still so much healing to happen. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. I think it's really important. And for me, I'm just grateful that this current of beloved love has returned into my life. And my only desire at this time is to constantly cultivate that love, even when I'm triggered, even when I feel, ugh, certain days are weird and void, and still. We're riding a wave, and riding a wave is sometimes not easy. Sometimes it's intense, you have to hold on, and sometimes it's easy and you're flowing, and it's like a real wave, you know, in the ocean. So it is what it is, and we each have to partake in where we are and play the part that we're here to play for ourselves and for others, because we owe it to all of us. Remember, we're one soul being. And the deepest thing that actually connects us beyond the knowledge and who's ahead and who's more advanced, you know, all that shit, is, you know, from the perspective of masculine and feminine, is that sacred sexuality. Because, you know, that's the beauty of also on earth, of this love union, love connection, love making. Because in that moment, you don't know time or space. You're just in that soul union with the other. And that means you've forgotten about the mind. It just doesn't exist, you know. And that means that you've surpassed that which, oh, that person is here, I'm there, what makes us separate? Or there's still division between us. And because of that division, there's a sense of lack of worthiness, either within one or both. But in this melting pot, this melting space, this sacred union, there's this timeless state that we're tapping into, and then we're needing to bring it to the human self, bringing it from the soul to the body. From the soul to the body. Okay, my beloveds, I think that's it for today. Those of you who want to watch some of these Illumined Beloved readings, they're all on Patreon, because if you join, you have to go through all of the content. There's a lot. I know you have to browse your way through and just find what resonates with you, because I know there's so many videos now. I've created a lot besides what I already do on YouTube. And they're long, they're quite long videos, most of them. And so you just choose what resonates with you, you know, and maybe sometimes it's just one thing you need to hear. And sometimes you stay longer. It is what it is. Again, that's life. We can't control it. We simply live it, and we follow the current of that beautiful, infinite, eternal love that's within us. So I greet you with that beloved space in my heart, which is my ultimate desire to hold that state of consciousness as maximum potency that I can, and cultivate that force of life through the beloved feeling. And that will continue to be my calling until the rest of my days here. And I'll see you next time, as always, with so much love, wisdom, and power, and of course the beauty of the beloved love.